Great. Okay. So I think the room is filling up nicely. So just to welcome everybody again. So you're all very welcome to this Blue Monday webinar hosted, of course, by the District Societies and Thrive, which is the in-house Institute's Wellbeing Hub. So you're all very welcome. Often referred to as the most depressing day of the year. Researchers tell us that the third Monday of January is when we're at our lowest. So the bright lights of Christmas are obviously behind us, and the days are still a bit grey and dark, although we have some nice sunshine today, which is great. So we still have another week to go to payday, which is obviously a little bit of a pain point for many people, myself included. So look, to help us banish the effects of Blue Monday, we're delighted to welcome our speakers here today. We have former Irish Rugby Union player and founding member of the rock band Hermitage Green, Barry John Murphy, also joined by Don O'Sullivan, former editor of the Limerick Leader, who many of you will recognise from Live 95 hurling, football and rugby commentaries. And then finally, we also have Owen Kern, who is an ambassador for Sea Change, which is the anti-stigma mental health charity here in Ireland. So you're all very welcome. So all of our speakers are going to be talking a little bit about their own lived experiences and sharing with us how we can protect and support our own mental health. So obviously, please feel free to pop in the questions, and we'll get to those at the end. So for the time being, I'm going to hand you over now to the speakers. So over to you, Don. Okay, so we've had just a small little hitch there with the recording. So just to let you know what was happening in the conversation. So Don was just asking Barry about his transition from his rugby career into his music career and just the impact it had on his mental health. So we're going to pick up the conversation at that point. So enjoy.
And then, unfortunately, throughout my career, I had an awful lot of injuries, plagued with them. So inevitably, at 27, I got a very bad injury and had to retire. And for that year, when I was rehabbing before I retired, I started getting back into music more and playing as much as I could to occupy my mind, which was the hardest part of being injured, and started a band, Hermitage Green, with a few of my mates, just something to do. And we played for about 6 months while I was still a rugby player, and then I had to retire. And the only thing I knew other than sport was music. So I kind of went straight into that. And that was 2011. So we're 11 years now playing with the band. And it's been an incredible journey so far, and hopefully still more to come. So that's pretty much in a nutshell where I'm at.
And a lot in there. Just we'll touch on a couple of strands there that you touched on there. So I suppose one would be, we'll talk rugby first, and that you said you went into that environment with Munster. Was it daunting? There's a lot of big characters in that dressing room, and we'll touch on it as we go through this chat today. Like you're almost like a role model for being yourself. You're very much Barry Murphy. But was Barry Murphy to the fore when you went into that dressing room first, when you see someone like a John Hayes, a Paul O'Connell, or an Alan Quinlan?
Not at first, no. I think at first I went in with zero expectations, and that was gradually beaten out of me in a certain way. Whether that's me not being a strong enough character to remain myself, or else it's just something that happens in sport, in the sporting environment, where you become a part of a machine, a functioning machine, and you can get chewed up and spat out a little bit. I definitely went into it. I remember at the time there was no Munster Academy. There was the pathway was so much different to what it is today, where you're kind of you're fed at about 15. You're kind of brought into it, and they start finally tuning you there. Whereas back in my day, I was 19, and I could have been. I remember just wanting to go down surfing in the Hinch one morning, and I had a camper van that I'd packed up with the stuff, and I got a call to say, "Oh, can you come out to Thomond Park? Alan Gaffney wants you to train with Munster." And I was like, "Ah, Jesus, okay, I'll go out there." And I rocked in the camper van, and they were all laughing at me and slagging, like, "Who is this fella that's coming in here?" And John Kelly, I remember talking about it at the media that weekend, that this fella showed up, and next time I was in the team that weekend or on the bench to play against the Dragons. And that's how it worked back then. So it was kind of, I didn't have any expectations of a career. I just thought this would be funny to go back and tell my mates tonight that this is what I was doing for the afternoon, we play with Munster. And I loved that I suppose I was, that you were kind of allowed to be yourself. And in that dressing room, there was so many characters and so many individuals that was the beauty of the team back then. It became very serious very quickly, I think, within that environment. That was 2003. By 2006, you had a number of players like that had become seasoned internationals and were coming back from Lions tests, and the standards went through the roof. And I found that very difficult, intense, and that was tough. That was when I started questioning a lot about my own resilience and my own abilities and stuff. So that was hard, but incredible at the same time. So yeah, that if that answers your question, that it was a slow process to when I found it to where I found it tough, or it took a long time. I feel like I started struggling with my identity almost at that point. I think that's why maybe these days kids start at 15, 16 and they start learning a little bit more about what it takes to become a professional rugby player, whether they're up for it, whereas being thrown in the deep end, it can make it more interesting, but it was tough at times.
I don't know whether you did or not at the time. I would confidently say you probably didn't. There wasn't an environment in there at the time to talk to people, to sit down, to chat. I know you had some close friends in the group at the time, but there wasn't really an encouraged, they talk now about teams might say goal setting, then they might have mindfulness, they might sit down and say, how's everyone feeling this morning? I can't imagine it was like that, was it, at the time?
No, not at all. And to be fair, some of the lads that I went in with that I would have been close to, they were getting cut or chopped and gone, and a lot of it was because they weren't, funnily enough, they were still remaining to be themselves, or were sticking their head up above the rest, and I just got really good at staying quiet and staying under the radar. When it in terms of like how you would talk or how you would behave, and I just did my talking on the pitch and stuck my head down. So it became quite a lonely place for a while. I was like, geez, I don't know if I can survive this. And the coaches back then were so hard on younger players we had a lot of Australian coaches, and that was the way they used to deal with things. It was just go hard on people and see if they can sink or swim. And I found that particularly difficult. And no, there was no support in terms of sports psychology for the first 3 years. Then Declan Kidney came back in to Munster, and Declan was a guidance counsellor in school by trade. That was his job before he became a professional coach. So that was his whole thing, was creating an environment that people were comfortable, and there was confidence, and yeah, just people could be themselves, and you could have someone to talk to. And he brought in a sports psychologist named Declan Ahern, who's a close friend of mine still to this day, and he changed my life at that point, because I started understanding what it was like to be able to talk to someone and process what I was going through. And basically, it's called sports psychology, but I feel like I started therapy at 23 years of age when Decky came in, and I started dealing with my injuries properly, dealing with a lot of stuff that I had struggled with in my teenage years, and learning difficulties that I would have had, and that kind of stuff that I didn't really understand. And Decky allowed me to kind of to express myself, and it was all like a lot of cognitive behavior therapy. So how I'd manage myself Monday to Friday, how I'd manage my day, how you'd manage yourself in an environment like that, in a tough group that are very hard on you, and it's all about winning and performance. So yeah, you hear about Keith Earls. I'm sure a lot of people have read Keith Earls' book or seen him on the Late Late Show, and that was, even Keith came in at a similar time to me, even though he's 4 years younger than me, but he was just that good that he was brought into that environment at 18, and it had none of the structures in place. And you kind of hear what it did to him at that time, and it was Decky and fellas like that finally he started being able to talk to. But it still didn't, I suppose, it wasn't accepted by everyone. So I had to start kind of talking to Decky on my own. It wasn't really accepted by the whole squad, so it was a million miles off what it is today, I think.
Something we'll touch on in a while too, Barry, when you're talking about music and the euphoria of playing in front of the crowd and them singing your song back to you. It's the same in rugby. You score a try, crowd are roaring, but we've touched on this before when we've had chats that the down afterwards, the low after the peak. And anyone that's listening today might have it when they're working on a big project or get that promotion, get that gig, and there's a massive buzz, there's a high, but then there's a down. And I think we've done this before, but give us a run through some of the injuries you've had and then tell us what it's like to be out of that bubble. Because I think when you're in that bubble, it's a bit of crack, you're traveling, you're going around the world with the rugby team, but then suddenly you can be taken away from that, can't you, for 4 or 5, 6, 7 months at a time, and that's tough.
Yeah, it was. I suppose you're right. The euphoria of sometimes it's not even the euphoria, the crowd or whatever. It's just when, for me in particular, I would have a lot of self doubt in my head. I live in my head a lot of the time, still to this day. And when I was a teenager and a young rugby player, it was always there. The self critic was in hyperdrive, like just taking over all the time. But the only time it wasn't was when I was in full flow in a match or training where I could completely just do what I'm best at, the one thing that I'm fully confident in, and play. So that was the euphoria for me, whether it was in front of 100 people down and you playing with my club in Bowes or playing in a packed home park. You almost forget about the crowd until the match is over, and okay, you kind of get the buzz of that then afterwards. But it was just the fact that you're in flow and you're doing something that you're good at, that I think that's where the addiction comes, if that's what you want to call it, or the love for it really comes. And it's the exact same with being on stage. It's just doing something that you're so confident in, that you put so much effort in, and you can just drift off into that world. And then when it's gone, COVID from a music point of view was hell on earth, because all I've known about music for 10 years is gigging, and then 2.5 years without it. Just like that during COVID was tough. And then back to the rugby was, I had my first serious injury at 23. I broke my fib and tib and dislocated my ankle. I was out for almost a year. And to go from, just before a Heineken Cup quarterfinal, heading into that to getting injured and potentially career-ending injury, it was horrendous. And having to then find yourself on a couch and try and piece yourself back together, or understand how to care for yourself mentally. It's very difficult. I mean, it was character building for sure, but it was definitely, like, it started there. If you like, I think we did this before where I listed off the injuries that I had, and so until you do that, you're like, Jesus, you don't realize. But if you go from top to bottom, I had 7 or 8 concussions, pretty bad concussions, broken nose, endless amount of split foreheads, top of my head, broke my jaw, still can't bite anything with my jaw. I can only touch the last back 2 teeth, so my wife has to mush up most of my food for me. Fractured sternum, dislocated both shoulders, subluxed both my AC joints, broken ribs, torn hamstrings, torn quad off the bone, chronic patella tendonitis, medial tear in my ligaments, my knee, 9 surgeries on my ankles, and 2 surgeries on my foot, which was the retirement that I had, broken bones in my toes and hands and wrists, etc. So insane amount of injuries. But when you're in the middle of it, you just kind of comes to the territory, you get on with it. And I'm actually fine. I can still play a little bit of 5-a-side soccer, which is the best part of my week. But it did take a lot of kind of, self-belief and a lot of support, incredible amount of support from my family, from the teammates and the staff at Munster and Ireland to kind of pick you back up and get you back, not only back training, but the confidence to get back in the pitch after a year out and still think you can play at that standard. So it was a long journey for kind of 7-8 years that I was professional with all those injuries. So learned a lot.
The amount of trips to the A&E alone, I think you're the cause for the crisis at the moment. You're taking up all the beds out there for the last couple of years. Just to remind anyone, obviously, that's listening, take any questions in the comments there. Just leave the questions. We'll come to them at the end of any questions for Barry. I'll describe it as the outside looking in. We heard Barry Murphy's injured, potential to retire. He's after starting up a band. I think you were kind of known as Brian Murphy's brother's band. Brian owns the Curraghour. And there was talks of Felix Jones, now World Cup winning rugby coach, playing a triangle at some point, or maybe a Baron or some shape or form. Yeah. So talk to us then about the music and the creativity. That you said that was in you from a young age. Did it take a lot of confidence, or like were you going out on a limb here by starting up a band, or was it literally just something to do while you thought through what you were going to do post rugby?
It was definitely something to do. Declan Kidney had this knack where he when you were injured or when he felt like you needed something, he put pressure on you to do something that you had to literally show him that you were doing something outside of rugby. So I got back into music, started playing a lot more guitar and singing and stuff. And then when I got that serious injury at 27, I started really enjoying the music, and by chance bumped into my brother Dan and his mate Dara, and I was out for a drink with my mate Dara, and we met at the corner of O'Connell Street in Limerick, and we just started chatting about music and went for a pint, and then we said let's sit down and play sometime. So the next night we went into my older brother's pub, the Curraghour, and Felix Jones was living upstairs from me in an apartment in Castletroy, and Felix had just joined Munster, and he played Bowron and I played guitar, and we started going in playing a bit of trad, and it was more to just, as you said, pot of tea in front of us, just doing something positive at the time when we were both injured, and Limerick was the most depressing place in Ireland because the recession had just kicked in, and I think we were hit particularly bad. So look, it was a bit of crack, something to just switch my brain off, to be honest. But obviously, the love for it and the passion was there, and we all, like, the stars aligned in a way that we all were finishing up what we were currently doing. And apart from Felix, who had to go back to his rugby career once I retired, and we realized that, okay, there's something in this. But it was incredibly daunting then to take it as a career. But I suppose I was young enough at 27 that I could do that. I didn't have a wife or kids that relied on me, that I needed to go into a proper job. I could just throw my hand at this. And but it was, I mean, going up on stage, not as like I wouldn't have called myself a musician at all. I still don't. But when you look at some of the talent out there, so going up on stage in front of people was horrendous. It was another one of those challenges for a person who's still crippled with self-doubt for most of the day, and still found myself on stage and going to myself, what am I doing on this stage? Thinking that everyone was kind of, it's like that imposter syndrome when you think people are judging you, or that you're not good enough, whatever. And I would have had that a lot in my rugby career and as well. So it was weird to go from one to the next, but I think the creative side was always something that I craved, and but that took a lot of trying to get my head around. It still does. It's such an intangible thing to try and create something out of nothing and trying to find what it is you're trying to say. But I feel I've always been drawn to it for whatever reason, whatever it was with me as a kid growing up, that I felt like I had something in me that I needed to get out. I feel that's why I went down the sports route, that I had to express myself in a way that I couldn't in other ways. You know what I mean? That I that was my thing, to get that energy out of me. And I feel the same with music, that I'm constantly trying to get something out of me that's, you know, that's locked or stuck or whatever. And the best way for me to express it is through songwriting, words, singing, and playing. So that is something that is, it's tough to do, but it's so rewarding if you can find it and get it out. And that's the constant, I suppose, test or thing I'm striving for.
What's it like when you're in a gig and you're playing a song that you may have written upstairs or on the way to surfing or whatever, and people are singing it back to you and it resonates with them? You said to me before, you looked down into the crowd one day and there was a group of lads just singing their absolute heads off to some song that you'd written years before. Like, that must be crazy.
It is. It's when you meet people that I suppose that's brilliant in the moment, but it's almost when you meet people and they say it to you. Met Jack Crowley, the out half /12 from Munster. I met him in a pub after the Toulouse match a few weeks ago, and he just came up to me and he said a song of ours called Lake Winnipesaukee means so much to him, got him through a tough patch last year, where he didn't know what he was going to do, and the words resonated with him, and that's blows my mind. Like, I had to leave. I was just like, this, I need to go in and think about this. Left the pub and went home, and I was like, that's really special. It's something that I would have really found. Music has played a massive role in my life. Just listening to it, it gets me out of bed in the morning, changes my mood. I mean, I'm putting on music to kind of build myself up for different times of the day. So I never thought for a second that the shoe will be on the other foot. So yeah, it's incredible. It's kind of pressure then to try and keep doing that. I suppose the other side of it, because it's not like turning on a tap, or people always say it's flexing a muscle, whereas I find that sometimes quite difficult to do, to keep going to the well to find something to write about. And because the only way I think you really get that response from people is when you really dig deep and you get out something that is honest. It's the best way to do it. And but at the same time, it's very inspiring when someone does say that to you.
Yeah, it certainly is. One of the main things I love about chatting to you, Barry, on anything that we do, even when we're chatting personally, is I suppose it's mad for me, who would have been a journalist covering Munster, covering Ireland, watching you sing, that you think you have it all cracked, and then you're so open when you chat about that and the struggles of being an international rugby player, the struggles of being the lead or whatever founder of a brilliant rock band. It just goes to show that no matter where we are in life, it's a constant process, isn't it, to keep those things kind of ticking over. Nothing comes easy to anyone, even though the perception on the exterior might be that fella has it all sewn up.
Absolutely. I mean, people say that to me all the time, and maybe it's because it's to do with the job, that they're kind of unique jobs, or something that might be pipe dream jobs as a kid. But I would look at you and everything you do, and I'm like, how does he fit that into the day? And how much sharper you are with your the way you process things. You seem like you're a step ahead, and anytime I speak to you about stuff, you have an anecdote for it that you almost like as if you're going to a filing cabinet, and you can pull out stuff that so. And it goes for, we spoke about this, the chartered accountants in Limerick. Like I can't do my accounts. I can't do, the business side of the band. I just cannot do it. It's not there. And that blows my mind that people have that, level of ability that can run organizations. When we were doing this conversation in the Strand Hotel, and there was CEOs of the company, and you were asking me for advice on leadership. I was like, I don't know, so I only know what I'm good at. And I touched on it a while ago. Like, for me, the therapy side of things has been huge and still ongoing for me my whole life, and trying to understand. And I think this, because of the day that it's in it, I'm quite open to talk about, my struggles and ongoing kind of work that I have to do it myself all the time. And I'm starting to realize that why I am a certain way, why I went into sport, why I went into music, why I'm trying to get that energy out of me. That's something that was in me as a child for some reason. Whatever was happening with me as a kid, whatever position I was in my family, or whatever, I'm still trying to uncover that stuff that I feel that's they're my two things that I'm good at that help me get that energy out. And but they also are the hardest thing that I have to do. They're always the thing that brings me the most pleasure, but the most pain, or so everyone's different. Every single person is different. I just know that I've always had, I've been kind of, I have a little bit of a cross to bear for some reason. I know not everyone has struggles like what Blue Monday represents. I know a lot of people in my life. My wife doesn't have mental health struggles, so she doesn't really, she's unbelievable at helping me talk things through, but she doesn't have that self-doubt. So yeah, but she has other things, I'm sure. So it's kind of just for me, it's constantly trying to learn and how to do work on yourself and be sound to myself. I think that's the other side of it. I can, too more often than not, be very hard on myself, and trying to learn that that can be good. It can drive you in certain ways, but it can be crippling as well.
Just a last one from me, I suppose, Barry, would bring in Owen Kernan, then I know who's a Sea Change ambassador. We'll talk to him, and obviously Q&A as well at the end. Give us a kind of an idea of some of the things that you do. I know you're big on your nutrition, sleep. I know you meditate. There's kind of cold showers thrown in there somewhere, if I remember. And there's also you like being outside and just enjoying being on your own. Is it? You do an awful lot of work on yourself, as you say, being sound to yourself, don't you, during the week?
I try to. I mean, I've read every book that's out there, so I've got them all the little life hacks up the walls with cold showers, which is terrible, but it apparently works. Like at the moment, I try and get out. I'm listening to a guy called Andrew Huberman. He's a podcast called the Huberman Lab. If anyone is interested, check it out. It's fantastic, and he talks about the different things we can do in our day to kind of allow us release the dopamine and serotonin and melatonin throughout our day at the right times, and to kind of peak at different times, and to optimize all these different, like when to exercise, when to have your first coffee. And so I get up, I have a cold shower immediately. I go down and prepare a few things before the kids get up, and then I try and get sunlight into my eyes, or walk around basically for 20 minutes to half an hour before 9 o'clock. I'll have my coffee after an hour and a half, so I'm ready to go. I'll do a proper good morning walk where I get to open up my thoughts and what I want to maybe create that day. And those little things are great. I exercise every day. I try and eat healthy. But I also I like to surf. I like to run, and try and do extreme things sometimes for me need to, get me out of my head. I feel they help me to be creative when I'm like surfing in freezing cold. Tomorrow I'll go down now at 8 o'clock. I'll go to the Hinch and I'll surf, and it'll be tough and it'll be freezing. The waves will be massive, but that energy changes something in me. And for the rest of the week, it'll put a different slant on my week. I'll use that in a certain way, or else I'll get it out of me, because I don't know how to get anger out of me. Sometimes that's one thing that I've learned over the years. I don't know how to be angry or pissed off, and that's not good. And I suppose I used to probably get that out of me as a rugby player on the pitch, just by hitting something, just by, getting stuck in the mud or getting stuck into it. And not having that, I feel, is tough on anyone if they don't know how to get that anger out of them. We just build up and we release it in certain ways, whether it's going on the piss or going, or whatever it is that is not the healthiest way to get that stuff out of your body. So try and do all those, something different that gets that energy out or gets that release, whether it's a long walk with a friend or my wife, or something, or a hike, or, as I said, surfing, or a big long run, or something to get that energy out. But I could spend a week talking about this stuff, you know me.
I was going to suggest I go with you on a walk until you started talking about hiking and surfing. I'm out. It's definitely not happening.
Go for the drive.
Go for it. I'll drive along next year while you're going for a run. Owen Kernan, I know, is on the call as well, who's a Sea Change ambassador. He's turning on his camera there. How are you, Owen?
How are we?
I know that Sea Change are looking to end the mental health stigma. I think it's refreshing that someone like Barry there was chatting about, the struggles that an international rugby player can have, and then an international musician all in the one little bubble. It's great to actually have a conversation at times, isn't it?
Oh, it's fantastic. It really, really is. And, even, you take away Barry's accolades for a second and you just look at there's three men on this call, that's another side of it. Up until, I suppose, a few years ago, men didn't talk, or men weren't allowed to talk. So this is a great vista of three men on a call chatting about their mental health, which is fantastic. So yeah, Sea Change is very much around the idea of reducing the stigma around mental health and mental illness. And they do that in various different ways, but predominantly for me as an ambassador, I work in two ways with them. One is to talk about the language of mental health and mental illness and how we talk about it in appropriate and inappropriate ways. And then also to talk about my own lived experience of mental illness, which I've had all my life, living with right up to today. And through both of them, I suppose I hope to help people feel a little bit more comfortable when they are dealing with some issues or problems in their own head. And also for people who maybe don't have any mental health problems or mental illness, for those people to be able to understand and offer support and care to people who might be suffering at a particular time in their life. It's interesting to listen to two very Limerick, very true Limerick men. And I moved away from Limerick 10 years ago, but to hear some of the language that I remember from when I was in Limerick, words like insane, mad, sound, all those kind of typical Limerick colloquialisms that, funnily enough, nowadays, I would teach and offer views on about not using that type of language. One very obvious one that I talk about a lot is the word insane. And we hear that so much as a fun word, as a good word, as a word that, something is insane, it's brilliant, or for example, the weather, we talk about the weather's insane outside. The weather isn't insane. It doesn't have an emotion. It doesn't have a soul. It's actually unpredictable. And by using language like insane, you're dismissing the credibility, you're dismissing the weight behind what that actually means. Another good example is OCD. I live with OCD on a daily basis, and OCD is not just liking to have my pens in a particular lineup of colors. It's very intrusive thoughts that make me want to do particular compulsions and behaviors, which can be life-limiting at times or quite debilitating at times. So when you hear someone say, he's a little bit OCD, he likes to have his things in a particular way. No, he's not a little bit OCD. You either are diagnosed with OCD or you're not. That's one of the things we do is we talk a lot about the language we use, and how it can be dismissing at times, but also can be empowering in other ways. When you give it the credibility that it deserves. I myself have lived experience of mental illness, which really came to the fore about 4 years ago in 2019. Interestingly, I could resonate a lot with what Barry was talking about there. I'm not a professional rugby player, I never was, but I lived in Limerick for many years, and Limerick's quite a tribal city. And if you're not part of the gang or you're not part of a group, it can be quite a lonely city to live in. So you're constantly fighting to be part of a crew in a way, or be and to feel valued at the end of the day. So that was kind of a lot of my upbringing, was learning that if you were constantly trying to win people over in a way, if that makes sense, you were constantly trying to keep people happy, because as soon as you annoyed someone, you could be thrown out on your ear, or built up to a certain point and then knocked down off the pedestal kind of thing. And so that was kind of what I grew up with, and I've taken that with me into later life. And so for my 30s, I was constantly living with that idea of needing to constantly make people happy above myself. I totally forgot about looking after myself. That value structure that I had for other people, I didn't have for myself. I didn't see myself as being worthy. Barry talks about surfing there. I'm a kite surfer, which is another version of surfing. And there's times I go out in 40 or 50 knot winds into the waves. I jump 20 meters high, come off the water, and that, like, for a lot of people, that would be quite an achievement. But someone could say something to me on the beach, and I'd be knocked down straight away, and it could be the most innocuous little thing, or it mightn't even be that they say something. It could just be that they do something, or a bit of body language that I read the wrong way. And all of a sudden, I'm knocked down, and that all the magic of that session is gone, only because of what's going on up here, but not because of what anyone has said or anyone has done anything specifically or purposely, So a lot of all of that, I ran my own business for a number of years and things like that. So I was doing a lot where I was having to try and generate the feedback. I was having to try and generate the positive feedback back to me. And that culminated in 2019, me falling off a cliff is the way I describe it. I became suicidal and developed an eating disorder, became anorexic and orthorexic. I was diagnosed with depression, generalized anxiety disorder, and OCD, which it turns out I've actually lived with since I was about 3 years old, was officially diagnosed. And so since then, I've been through treatment, quite intensive treatment. I found myself in a mental illness facility, treatment facility for 4 months, living there as a residential patient. And a couple of things that Barry said there were very interesting in terms of that idea of, learning from each other and that ethos that Declan Kidney brought into the Munster team of making people feel comfortable. Because up until that point of being in that facility, I hadn't been able to talk. I didn't have anyone to talk to. And next thing, I found myself in a room, and you got to picture this for a second. I was 36 years old. I was a male, very happily living with my partner. And, we didn't have kids or anything yet, but we were very much living a normal life. And then I found myself in a room because it was an eating disorders facility, naturally the demographic for eating disorders is younger females. And I found myself in a room with an 18-year-old girl and a therapist, and we were talking. And I'm kind of at the beginning of this whole process, I was kind of going, oh, am I actually going to get anything from this? What's going to happen? And but I kind of given myself over because I was very much lost in life now at this point. And this particular girl, at age 18, was able to teach me things that no one my age could teach me, because she was experiencing the world that I didn't understand, the likes of the TikTok, the likes of the Snapchats, the social media, the fast-paced world that we live in nowadays, where, the three of us in this call are maybe the generation previous to that, where it was maybe slightly slower. And then our parents lived in a generation slightly slower than that. So she was able to teach me things about the generation that she lived in now that we are expected to understand. And then I was able to teach her things about the generation prior to her that she couldn't understand, maybe in terms of how her parents were teaching or her parents were giving her information. So it was this wonderful kind of collaboration of learning from different generations, which was fantastic. And so the reason I mention that is because anybody on this call or anybody you might work with, that there's an opportunity to learn from everyone. So when you talk, you never know who might be able to just give you a little bit of help. And it's not always going to be the person you expect. So, just bear that in mind. If you're ever looking for help, it doesn't have to be, your family. It doesn't have to be your partner. It can be anyone. Once you can find someone that you feel comfortable talking to. Talking is a fantastic tool that we don't do enough of nowadays. We're so engrossed in computer screens. We're so engrossed in, the phone and texting. I hate texting. I'll always pick up the phone and try and make a call because I like to hear someone's voice, and I also will understand the tone of voice sooner than understand the tone of a message. So it's easier to not, start overthinking and reading into what someone is saying. And then the other thing that I just wanted to pick up on from what Barry said was the creativity side of things, and how important that is. When I was in treatment, I had never done art therapy before. I'd never engaged in art therapy. I wasn't an artist. I can just about draw a stick man. That's about it. We used to get put into a room as a group once a week, and we were given various different art tools and paper and different things and whatever. Sometimes you were given a theme, sometimes you weren't. And over those 4 months, I developed a folder. Those folders that you see art students walking around with the big A1 folders, the big things. I have one of them at home now, and it's one of my most treasured things that I will never give up, because it has all of my thoughts and secrets in it, all through art, all through paintings, drawings, blank pages, a bit of everything in it, that allowed me to really get to the nuts and bolts of what was going on in my head and why I was in so much distress. And so if you are feeling low, or you're feeling, that you have some thoughts that you just can't make head or tail of, art therapy is something to consider, or some sort of creative therapy is a thing to consider, whether it's dance, or, as Barry discovered, music, things like that. It's a wonderful way of getting our thoughts straight, and getting some things out there. And the last thing to say, based on my own experiences, the idea that everything is temporary and nothing is permanent, even the good stuff. And you have to remember that if you can accept that with the good stuff, it makes the bad stuff much easier to live with as well. I've just come off the back of a wonderful weekend where I turned 40, and driving home last night, I was going, oh, the whole thing, thanks. The whole thing is over. And I was really sad about the whole thing being over, because I spent a lovely weekend with my family, and we had great crack and all that kind of thing. I was going, oh, it's all done now. But I then started to kind of accept that, because I knew that, okay, that's done, but something good will come down the line again, because everything, it's like waves on the water. Like Barry experiences surfing, I experience kitesurf. It's waves in the water. You get the big ones, and you get the small ones, and you get the troughs in between. And if you can learn to accept that in life, it makes it a lot easier to live with.
50 will be here before you know it, man. Don't worry.
Well, for the 2E, you're 40, I'm 42, and I look 50. So that's great. Most important thing we've learned from today. Owen, listen, thanks a million for that.
Brilliant.
And your shared
brilliant.
experience is brilliant. As you said, to touch on the point again, talk, so vital. I think giving everyone of their time. I know myself and Barry would often be accused of, people look at us, sometimes we're chatting away and we're gone very deep and meaningful, but that's the best way to be. Always chat to your friends, or as you say, Owen, it may not be your friends. That one person coming along who takes the time out of their day to have a chat with you, why not engage with them and see how we get on? I know we have a couple of questions in the Q&A. I know, Dee, you might want to come in here and before we finish up and go through some of those. There's some good questions in there for Barry.
Yeah, listen, Don, thank you so much. And I know we were probably thinking we might get our knuckles wrapped for the lack of diversity with the 3 men, but I never thought it'd be 3 men from Limerick. So I don't know what the hell we were thinking. But look, that was an amazing conversation. And as you rightly say, 3 men chatting about their mental health. I mean, who would have believed it? But this is a testament to the days that we're living in now. And I think COVID helped, because we're so busy talking about our physical health, but we ended up talking about our mental health as well. So I think we've kind of come a long way, and we're all going to benefit from that. So I just want to thank you all for your honesty and the great stories and the tips and the kind of advice and support that you've offered to everybody listening today, because I know definitely, there's no doubt about it, 1 in 4, 1 in 3 of us are tackling, the difficult stuff and the mental health challenges along the way. And sometimes they're temporary, and sometimes they might be a bit more long term. But look, I want to just, we definitely have some questions. But Don, I don't know whether you want to take them from the Q&A box there, or I'm very happy to.
Take one there. There's one in here. There's not really a question, but I'm amazed. An imposter syndrome is so strong and someone so talented in such diverse areas. It's refreshing to see this out in the open. I had to explain what it was to a colleague recently, and I'm a 62-year-old male who didn't believe it was real. So there you go, Barry. I think they're talking to you there when they say someone so talented. It could be me. They didn't clarify. But that imposter syndrome is an interesting one, and everyone gets it, no matter what level or achievement you do. Everyone, I think, we touched on earlier, big contracts, big promotions, you get that new job, you get that new gig, whatever, and you're just sitting there going, oh my God, how did I end up here? But you're there for a reason. I take it you would be the same, Barry. The work that goes into it is not seen.
Yeah, it's a tough one to get your head around, because I assume it comes from your childhood in some way, that's embedded somewhere, that doubt, that's very hard to shake, and it probably only really raises its head when you're in a very uncomfortable environment, or you feel naked or alone or whatever. And it's it's a little bit liberating when you're become more aware of it. But I've definitely tried to actually put into practice just being present and being in your body, because what happens to me, it's like fight or flight. So I completely disassociate when I get like that, and I switch off and I get into my head and I almost freeze in my body. And I can actually, the more I've started looking into it and working on it, the more I'm aware of my body when it happens now. If I start to get that doubt in my head, when I start getting anxious and uptight, or if it was in the rugby pitch, it was probably nervous and making mistakes because you start letting that voice in. So I start, when I'm on stage now, I'll float above my body, out of my head, out of everything. I'll just picture myself almost zooming out over the stage. I remember doing it in King John's Castle in Limerick here, where I was literally floating above the whole city, looking down at the people watching and everyone having a good time. And I remember just going, this is incredible. That, you know, this is where my life has led me, that I'm here and I should be just trying to enjoy it. And then all of a second you're back in the moment. And I remember it so clearly, just looking around and being so grateful that I'm here with my friends and having a good time. And it's the opposite of what it was before. Before it was like, it's so inside, so frozen, so alone and anxious, and hated it, absolutely hated it. And people would be saying, wow, what an experience from stage and the crack, it's just cool. I could be having a nightmare and doubting everything, know that I'm going to approach the microphone, I could be out of key, I could forget the words, I could make a mistake with my guitar. And then, as you said, when you then come out the other side and you're so present and you're so, you almost let that disintegrate, that doubt, then you start realizing that I have done the work. I don't need, it's there. I know that I'm here for a reason. I don't need to be anxious about anything. And it's not, that's a lot easier said than done. It's a constant work on for me. But I think that's the essence of imposter syndrome, when you have those doubts in your head, and that's my way of getting out of it.
Yeah, fair play. That's a great answer. There's one more here as well, or two more here. Sorry, let's go through. First is thank you for being so honest and open. To financial worries, Barry. I think everyone does.
I do and I don't. I have a very simple life. I have a very small amount of demands, if you like. So I don't really put a huge amount of pressure on myself. For my idea of success isn't a big house, big car, loads of money. Never has been. And I think it just doesn't cross my mind. I kind of live. I know what I need to earn to survive, to keep my kids clothed. So it wouldn't be one of those things that I suppose gets me down. Funnily enough, my wife does enough worrying about that for the two of us. But I mean, that's probably, I'm very fortunate to maybe have that scenario or whatever. And not to share it too much. I don't make a lot of money. Anyone that knows the music industry now knows that that's not the way it works these days. So it's not like I'm incredibly comfortable or anything like that. I just live a fairly simple life, and yeah, I'm actually never think about it, but now the question has been asked, I'm very lucky that I don't. I know my mom grew up in a different scenario in Limerick, and her, even though she's lived a fine life, they had a family. My dad had a family business that my mom went into and worked in, and we had a nice life growing up. But she is still crippled by the anxiety that she had grown up, not having, any money really, and as a child and stuff. So I feel lucky when I talk to her that I don't have those anxieties.
Yeah, what a lovely take on it. Last one here then, from Jennifer. Barry, you mentioned the different things that you do to look after your mental health, and there's loads of research around how to bring in habits, etc. But what did you find was the best to make this part of your everyday life?
Exercise is still the one for me that I can't be without, whatever way. And that's when I slip, is when, like, if I pick up an injury or I overdo it and I can't exercise, that's when I really start to struggle. I know everyone is different, and that's again back to when I grew up. That was my way of escaping as a child. All I knew what to do. For me, when I try and look back in my life, play wasn't even a huge part of how I approached sport. It was a way to get out of my head from whatever I was doing, whatever was going on in my head as a kid. And as a teenager, for sure, that was my way of getting out of my head. So that's my way of doing it. But that, I suppose, the creative side that we're talking about, what Owen talked about, in that the art therapy, that is something that I need to keep evolving, or changing, or trying to find. That's where I need to dig deep on that side of things. That I need to, anytime I find I'm not working right or something's going wrong, I need to change things massively with my energy. If I talked about that before, getting it out in some way like that, expressing myself in a different way. Singing doesn't always do that for me. Playing music doesn't always do it for me. So yeah, getting creative with that, even just having fun with that side of things, to get those emotions out. And again, what Owen mentioned, and you did, Don, is like, I've always heard about talking to people, but I didn't know what that meant. Men should talk. I was like, I don't know what that means. Talk about what? But, and how and who. But like, it's not until you go for a walk with someone, and I feel like you need to do it right. You can't just sit in the pub and have a pint. Granted, it might come out. You can't do it with 3 people because it's weird. So you go for a walk with someone for 2 hours, and you share and you talk and you open up and you lend your ear to them, and vice versa. And then by the end of it, as Owen said, you've no idea what could come out, what they could help you with. And they always will, if it's the right person, then they always will. So yeah, they would be the kind of the main ones for me.
I just add two things to what Barry was saying there. Just in relation to the talking and going for a walk, which is fantastic. And yeah, look, men talk side by side. They don't talk face to face. It's very difficult. But alongside talking, and again, this is for anyone on the call today who may not be someone who's dealing with any mental health or mental illness problems at the moment, but for someone who's maybe supporting someone. One of the most important things you can do is listen properly, and listen intently, not listen with solutions, because sometimes when someone comes to you with a problem, particularly, if I go to my partner, if I'm having a particularly bad mental health day, let's say, because I can have good days and bad days, even though I live with mental illness, I can have good mental health days and bad mental health days. But if I'm having a particularly bad day, sometimes I'll go to her and I'll start talking to her. And the last thing I want her to do is to give me the solution, or to give me to start trying to come up with ways of getting out of this, because I don't want that. I just want to be able to, nearly vomit it out in a way, so that it's not up here and it's not, it's not causing me problems up there. So it's very, very important to bear that in mind if you are supporting someone, that listening, and then when you answer, showing through whatever you say back that you did listen intently and you did listen properly, is very, very important, because sometimes it can take a lot for that person to open up. It can take a lot for that person to finally reveal whatever it is in their head. And they want to make sure that that's going to be accepted. If you are already concocting solutions and answers in your head while they're talking to you, you might miss the most important point. You might miss the critical key thing that that they're trying to say to you. So that's very, very important. And the second thing is just around the idea of routine, and building that into your life. I struggle a lot with the idea of failure. and being a failure and constantly failing, and anything that I will try, if it doesn't go right, oh, you're just a failure. You know, you fail at everything you try. So I had this little brainwave in one of my therapy sessions where I now never use the word challenge in my life anymore, because challenge implies success or failure. If you challenge yourself, you'll either be successful at the challenge or you'll fail at the challenge. So instead, I use the word experiment, and I experiment with things in my life. So I'll experiment with new ways of doing things or new routines. Sometimes they'll have a positive result, and sometimes they'll have a negative result. But that removes the ownership of that from me in a way, so that then for the next time I try and do something, I'll have learnings from that last experiment that I can take to try and do it differently. So instead of challenging myself and failing all the time, I'm just experimenting with things that sometimes are positive, sometimes are negative, but I'll always be learning for the next time I try it, and just removes that idea then of being a failure, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, William. Dee?
Wow, I love that last one there. Now that was very, very insightful, and what a great discovery to find in one of your therapy sessions as well. So thank you for sharing that with us. So look, here we are at the end of the hour, and it flew by. What a brilliant conversation. I have to say, I took an awful lot away from that, and I'm sure everybody on the call took an awful lot away as well. If anything came up for you, please remember the Thrive Wellbeing Hub. Come to us, and we'll give you all the support that you need in your area of need. So please don't forget about us. And really, all remains for me to say is thank you so much to Barry John, to Don, and to Owen for being so brave and honest about what's going on for you guys, and for making it really interesting and accessible to everybody in the audience. Really talking the language that everybody can understand. So it's really kind of destigmatized an awful lot of stuff, I hope, for people today. And we look forward to seeing you again in the Institute, maybe in person. Barry, I hope your tickets are selling well for your world tour. You're making us all very jealous, the thoughts of going off down under and all over the place. So I'm sure people can find your tickets online somewhere. If you want to throw that out there, is there a place where people can check you out and check your music out?
Yeah, Spotify, iTunes, we're everywhere. YouTube, hermitagegreen.com is the band, or is the website. We're playing in King John's Castle in April. We're playing a few festivals around the country as well. So yeah.
They can catch you there, or they can get on a flight and see you on the other side of the world as well.
Australia for Paddy's Day, if anyone's if anyone's in Australia.
That's a nice target.
It is.
So thank you, Don and Owen as well. Just Sea Change, if people want to check out Sea Change, is it seachange.ie, just to check out what's going on with all the great work.
Seachange.ie, there's a lot of resources there, both for individuals with mental illness and those supporting them. And also then, if anyone wants to get an insight into the life of a male living with an eating disorder, there's a documentary that myself and two other gentlemen took part in on RTE. It's on the RTE player called Unspoken. It came out in November 2021, and it's still available there for anyone to watch. And it will give you an insight into the life of a middle-aged man living with anorexia, which maybe you won't find in many other places.
Wow, that's amazing. What a fantastic yeah, absolutely, to shine a light on that particular topic is amazing, because I'm sure there's plenty of other people out there that would need to know that information and see about your experience. So thank you for that. So that's it. We've run out of time. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a good Blue Monday. It's not that blue after all, and we'll see you at the next event. So thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thanks, Steve.
Cheers.
Thanks, Don. Thanks, Owen. See you.